This is Len Newton, the RVI guy, and I've been helping companies go paperless and automate workflows with Real Vision imaging software since 1995. Welcome to the RVI Paperless Workplace podcast, where our topics bridge the gap between technology and expectations. Today's episode is called If You Build It, They Will Come. And I'm talking with Monty Chicola, president and founder of Real Vision Software. Now, personally, Monty is on my Mount Rushmore of smart people I have ever known. He is very engaging and he's got a very interesting story to tell. So buckle up. I'm sure we're in for some fun here. So, Monty, let's start from the very, very beginning. All right. You grew up in the hub of document imaging in Alexandria, Louisiana, and your childhood dream was always to start your own software company. So, is that the basic story?
That's a great line. That's what we used to tell IBM when we first started chasing IBM to sell our software. It was like, Alexandria, Louisiana, where the heck is that? We said, that is the Mecca of image processing. You're going to find out one day. So
Right.
Yes, it's kind of a small town. It's where I grew up. It's where I was born. Never really had the great ambition of moving back to Alexandria. I did out of college. I went to work for Blue Cross down in Baton Rouge. So it was like moving to the city. And then I had an opportunity to come back and get a job in my hometown. So I decided, well, why not? Let's just go back to Alexandria and see what happens there. So Baton Rouge was a good town. It was just Blue Cross wasn't paying me enough money at the time. And I just said, maybe it's time to make a move. But it was a good start. So yeah, I moved back to Alexandria, took a job as an IT manager of a distribution company, and went from mainframe IBM 3270 machine down to a System 34. So I'm one of those guys that started on System 34, then System 36. I never touched the System 38 and went to an IBM AS400, which now is the IBM I. So that was my little growth path on the way.
So, System 34 and System 38, I mean, did you have floppy disks and everything as well?
Oh, yeah.
I guess we got to bring that in.
Huge box. I mean, IBM tried to impress you. The 34 box was a huge box, and you open it up and there was like one little disk pack in there or two little disk packs in there. You could literally, it's like an old, if you've ever seen an old car and you raise the hood. I used to have a Malibu in high school, and you could raise the hood. It was a standard shift Malibu with no air conditioning. So you could literally climb in there. That's the way System 34 was, all blank space with a couple little moving parts, and that was it. But it was a big box to give you that great big box feeling. It was a great machine, though. I tell you, I learned to program. I went to Northwestern. I learned to program on a summer school class. I took RPG and I read the whole book the first night. I thought it was the neatest language I'd ever seen, the easiest programming and neatest language. And then when this opportunity came back up in my hometown on System 34, I said, and they said RPG. I said, I know RPG. And I went back home. They could have walked me to the copy machine and said, here's the System 34, and I'd not known any different. I'd never seen one in my life. And I just took that job on a whim and got back there and went to work. And I ended up starting RVI kind of on the back end of that. The company that I did go to work for went belly up one day. A guy that I knew came in, bought it, and lasted about a month afterwards, and the company went belly up. So I was kind of out figuring out now, if I owned my own company, then I'd have a better idea of if it was going belly up or not, instead of just getting, a message in the morning that, hey, look, by the way, the company's no longer going to exist after today. So it was kind of a funny thing, but it does give you perspective.
Yeah, so it's 30 years ago. You're working in the IT industry. You're a programmer. You're a director. You're running the deal, and somehow you come up with this idea that this product, which isn't even called RVI at the time, but suddenly that becomes a nighttime gig for you, where you're working during the day like a real job, and then at night you're writing code, and you get this idea. I want you to take us through that, but you pick up a few clients along the way. You think you got this concept. Talk about some of those days a little bit, where how you kind of tripped into this idea of coming up with a document imaging product.
And it really was truly the start of it was a tripped up idea. Here's the deal. I had a little brother that was sick in the hospital in Dallas, Texas. So I flew to Dallas, Texas to go visit him. So I'm sitting there, you know how boring it is in a hospital. And my little brother says, Monty, why don't you go down to InfoMart down there in Dallas? They got a lot of computer stuff on there, and he knew I was a computer guy. So I said, sure. So I go down to InfoMart, and it's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And there were these two guys standing in front of this big monitor, and it had an image on it. and I don't remember I think it was a car, but an image on the screen, and you'd never seen that before. I know it sounds stupid, sounds crazy for people that have 87,000 images in their pocket right now, right?
That's right.
But then you'd never seen it. So I walked up to the booth. I didn't have anything to lose. And I said, what is that? And they said, that's an image. I said, well, how'd y'all get it on that screen? They said, well, we have this card. It was AT&T. AT&T developed the first imaging card. It was called the Target card, if you've ever heard of it. So AT&T had this card, and these two guys were showing it for the first time at InfoMart. And when I said, well, what are y'all going to do with it? They said, we don't know. We need some software to get the image off the card so we can display it. And I said, well, I can do that. And I had a good friend that was an IBM SE at the time, and the best programmer I've ever met in my life. And he owned a software company. I knew between the two of us, we could wing it. So the guy said, well, how long do you think it'd take you to do that? And I said, well, how many of those cards you got? He said, I got 2. I said, well, if you give me one of those cards, I'll come back next week with it off the card and we could display it. So it's just a lawn dart I threw out there. And the guy's like, that sounds good. I said, okay, well, give me the card. So he gives me the card, and my friend lives in Bogalusa, Louisiana. Okay. Now, when we talk about Alexandria was a small town, if there's an armpit in the United States, okay, I'm telling you, it's Bogalusa, Louisiana. Bogalusa, Louisiana has a paper mill on the main street. Okay. So the whole town smells like a paper mill. If you've ever been around a paper mill, it is not pleasant. So I literally hopped in the plane from Dallas. I flew over to Bogalusa, Louisiana, with my friend Evan Hankins, who actually helped found the company with me. Evan Hankins, I literally in his barn, no kidding, he lived on a farm. It was a flood and rain. We put the card in a PC in his barn, and we're able to figure out a way to suck the image off of the card and store it enough that we could push it back out to a monitor and make it work. And literally the next week, I went back out to Dallas and showed it to the guys. And when I showed it to the two guys, I don't remember their names. I have all this written down in some place. But he said, well, how much do we need to pay you for that? And I said, well, how many of those cards you got? He said, 2. I said, well, I'll take the second one. So I got the second Target image card that was ever made by the manufacturer at AT&T. So it's kind of funny. So that's how we started it. And then I started thinking, you're going to be able to see houses on computer screens and things. So we started thinking, what can we really do with this thing? So I was System 36 programmer. So I wrote a little database and tried to, index these images and capture some images. The first real image that we did that with was my daughter. My daughter, who's now 33, actually was the true first. We took a old camcorder, took the image off the camcorder, digitized it, and stored it. So that was the first real true image that would ever been redisplayed back on a screen. And then we started thinking, with this, if you tied this to a database and you could have houses and you could show houses. So we started thinking, you can make an industry out of this one day. And I kept saying so I thought real estate was the big deal. So I ended up talking to Dave Woodring in town, and Dave Woodring was a real estate guy. So I was thinking we could show these houses on a computer screen, something nobody had ever done back then. So I used to tell people when we finally got around to trying to sell this thing, that one day you're going to be able to go into Sears, because I don't know how many of y'all still remember Sears. Back then Sears was the department store, right? That you're going to be able to go into Sears one day and buy a fishing rod without ever having to go into the store. And my partner Dave, who became my partner for Real Vision, kept saying, Monty, stop telling people that. They think you're crazy. And I said, there's no reason you can't buy a house or a fishing rod. And so anyway, so that was the original concept. So we had this idea. Dave was in the real estate business. I was in the computer business at the time. I was an IT director. Now that the distribution company went belly up, I was a IT manager for an insurance company. So I was working my insurance company job. And at night, like you said, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with this thing and try to write a little bit of code. So we bought a system and started trying to write code. And then we're staying up literally night and day trying to figure out what we're going to do. But in the meantime, we started chasing IBM, saying, there was a guy, the strangest thing in the world that put us together was emerging in advanced technology for IBM in Atlanta. The head guy for that was a Southern grad, Southern Louisiana University, which is, if you've ever seen like the Grambling Southern game, that's Southern. He was a lineman. He was a huge, big guy. Huge guy. He was a lineman for Southern. We kept saying, we'd have to explain, okay, it's an image. Well, what's an image? Well, what is it? What does it really look like? It looks like a real image. I mean, what do you? So we're going back and forth trying to explain what the word image means to somebody because nobody had ever seen it. And then finally, after probably the 763rd call with him, he finally said, I see, if you just let us come over there and show y'all, you'll understand it. I said, and if you don't like it, we're out of there. I'll fly myself over there. We'll be out of there in 10 minutes and like it never happened. Well, we went over there that morning on a rainy day in Atlanta, and we got there at 9 in the morning, and at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I finally stood up and said, okay, y'all have seen enough. They had people coming in out of the halls. They had people coming off the 4th floor. They didn't even know the people on the 3rd floor. Everybody was introducing people. I mean, they said they had seen something they had never seen before. So we figured this imaging thing one day was going to be a big deal. And then we went back. IBM told us not to tell anybody, and we figured they were just going to buy it outright and own it, and they didn't. So they decided they'd market it for us. So that's how the big step with IBM. But I really think it was because a guy named Zeb Ducray, I'll never forget his name. Zeb Ducray, this huge lineman from the great University of Southern out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, felt sorry for these 2 Louisiana guys and gave us a shot. And we showed them something they had never seen before. And that's how imaging actually got off the board.
Well, I'm going to pick up on that IBM story, but as you were telling that, a lot of what you said, I kind of knew the bits and pieces. I didn't know that you were in Dallas to visit your sick brother in the hospital. I didn't know that, but I know all about the Infomart back in the day. That was just kind of like, let's get a bunch of smart people together to talk about different technology things, and something will come out of that. So you're a success story from that. The company actually came out of that, and so you start talking about the IBM stuff, and I would have thought that, hey, you got this great concept, maybe it's time to go on Shark Tank, but instead you're working the IBM angle, which I think is terrific, and that's how I first heard about you. So you really grew the product. You had about a 10-year run with IBM, and they even gave you your own product number. And I remember that's how I first got exposed to RVI. I was on a team that was then assigned, as you said, the IBMers love what you showed them. And there was a great fit for it because IBM at the time had their products, but they were really at the high end of the pricing scheme. And you're coming in with this product that is just so ideal for particularly small and medium business companies. So talk about those 10 years where you had the IBM product number. We were coming up on Y2K. Everybody was updating their software. Times were just really flying back then in those days. But what are your reflections back on those times?
The IBM connection first started out that IBM was developing in this box that they were calling Silver Lake, and people were calling it something else. Right. Nobody knew what it was. So we went to emerging and advanced technology. Well, before we went, IBM sent us an AS400 on a bonded truck. Nobody even knew what it was. Mm-hmm. And we brought it over to the IBM building, which happened to be in Alexandria back when they had branches. We went over to the IBM branch and literally uncrated a AS400. And they wanted us to get imaging running on this IBM AS400 before they released it, because imaging nobody had ever seen. So we were going to show them something state of the art, that nobody had ever seen before on a new machine that nobody had ever seen before. Mm-hmm. So the connection was like the timing of the AS400 coming out and us coming out with imaging was actually exactly at the same time. So they sent us one on a bonded truck, and then IBM helped load our code on it, right? The IBM people at the IBM branch in Alexandria. So money had never really touched the box other than the software side on the back end, right? So then they let us fly out to Atlanta, and all I had was like a cartridge tape of my software, and they brought me to the computer room and they were like, okay, well, load it up. I'm like, load it up? I've never touched one before. I don't know how to restore a library on an AS400. They just saved it off the AS400 over there. So the IBM people got it going, and that's when we showed it there. So then IBM thought, RVI would be great for small banks, for community finance type banks and stuff. So they started promoting us as a product and really promoted us into banks. And back then, there were a lot of banking softwares. There was Jack Henry, but there was Peerless and all these other banking softwares that didn't have an imaging solution. So they all came running to us saying, can we interface with them? And that's really what RVI was designed to do. I mean, not many people say, I want to have a standalone imaging system. We do have people that run our imaging stuff standalone because I'll have a hospital that has rental property and they want pictures of their rental property, but they didn't buy it for that, right? So we really needed an application to tie this imaging system to. So we've always designed our software to be interfaceable from green screens, interfaceable from GUI, interfaceable from web and everything, because that's really where it came into life, was to say, hey, I'm sitting over here on this piece of property, hit a button, let me see the image, or I'm in the bank and I need to see your signature card, hit a button and see the image, right? So that's how we ended up starting with IBM, was in community finance banks. So we got really good at it, and they were installing a lot of it. And IBM was actually doing the installs mostly in the banks. We were doing some, they were doing some. Some we could just song and dance in, put in the same, systems and everything, and it worked great. And then we branched out to business partners. We started finding IBM business partners that could use us as credits within IBM to expand into their market. So then we had people pushing us in transportation, hospitals, casinos. And now RVI's got to figure out, what all do you do with these images in casinos? Or what all do they need images for in government? Or what all do they need images for in a transportation world? So we had people that were business partners that knew transportation real well or knew casinos real well. And then we would meet with those software vendors that had software within those industries and say, okay, from right here, when you hit this button, I want you to bring up a folio. Well, what's a folio? Well, that's the thing that tells them how much they got to pay at the casino, at the hotel when they go to check out. And you're like trying to learn tidbits about the industries as they go along. And I still tell people that to this day. I've had to touch so many industries and so many different things. So we know a little about a whole lot of industries, but I always tell people when they want to do something new with our software that understand you're the smart people on the phone. You know how to run a hotel, or you know how to run, a casino or a transportation. Although I've touched, hundreds, but I try to tell them we need to make it run the way you need your company to run. But that's how we started out, was just interface. And it's kind of funny, in the old demo days, we had people that would market us, and you've got 10 installs and you're hanging on them and hoping that they're happy and making sure it works, and it's still a state-of-the-art thing. And you go do demos and, well, how many installs you had? And we say, well, it's not how many installs we have, it's that we're backed by a multi-billion-dollar company. So we played the IBM angle forever and a day until finally we did get over 100 installs. And then once you say you got 100 up and running, people kind of give you the benefit of the doubt that maybe this thing really works. So it was kind of funny.
Yeah, you start out with a small concept, and what you really had was real deal software that you were willing to expand and extend. And it's a great relationship with IBM, because you're catching it out of the fire hose. You got no choice but expand into the hotels and industries and things like you're talking about, and that really did solidify your customer install base and help you build a partner channel and stuff like that. So then comes 2005, and IBM decides to go a different direction. They're on a year to year with you anyway. They didn't acquire your company. They let you operate independently. But IBM decides to go out and buy what was the leader in the content management industry at the time, FileNet. They pay about $1.6 billion to buy it. And they basically look at you and go, thanks, it's been a great run, but we're going this route. Which the bad news was, it terminates a great partnership with IBM that lasted 10 years. But the good news is you were really in good shape. You had a great customer base, you had an experienced channel, but what was the thought process back then? I mean, that was that was really a time of growth, and that was a punch to the belly a little bit when that happened, but you're in good shape.
Yeah, we were in good shape. The weird thing was IBM didn't really do this to get rid of RVI. IBM, they paid $1.6 billion for FileNet. And 1.6, they'd have never gotten to that number if they were trying to buy money. Okay, that was not going to be in the equation. They should have put me on for change on top of what they paid for FileNet.
That's right.
It is funny. But the funny part is they were really into the check image business. So when they were running us as an IBM product, they were in the check scanners and check imaging. And it was, Jack Henry and the people that were out of Albuquerque, I can't remember their name. So anyway, they just had so many problems with those scanners and so much work with it. And then IBM just said, there's just not enough money in parts. So when they cut the check imaging business, that's when they cut RVI. So it wasn't like it was personal and they were getting rid of us. But now we already had all these business partners. Now we didn't have to pay IBM to sell our software. We had to become internal to sell our own software. But one of the things we did is We always sold our software through business partners, specifically through the IBM channel. And we never sold our software on our own because we never wanted to compete against the people that were out there selling us. Even if a customer came directly to us, which they would from time to time, and say, well, I don't really need it, and say, but we use business partners. So we always went back to the industry, what partner was doing that industry, or the location, what partner do we have in that part of the nation, and send the business back through them. So we always tried to treat them well and not really sell the software directly. It was kind of funny. We get people that say, with the IBM deal, IBM wanted us to work with their fax people. So we had to go to Rochester and work with the fax people. Then they had their opticals come out. We had to go to Rochester and work with their opticals. And then, I mean, every single wheel of the whole makeup IBM had was tied with RVI. We wrote imaging code for their 3489 monitors. If you ever saw the old IBM image monitor, we wrote that code for IBM for that. And that was a great project. So I've been going back and forth to Rochester forever and a day on IBM, doing stuff for them and making things work. And originally we had to be in the common booth with IBM, side by side with their Image Plus folks who actually hated our guts. It was just a lot of fun. I mean, we'd tease them, they'd tease us. They didn't support 3489, so we'd always bring one with us just to harass them. So it was a fun time to do all of that stuff. But then as we got out on our own, it was really like you said, Lynn, we had more business partners than we could get to. We had more business than we could try to get to install. So we had to take on the banking installs and things like that. But it really turned out that we had a solid group of people working with us, a solid group of people working for us. And it became just, like you said, it was a bump in the road, but it was like, now we got more margin we could offer to our business partners. And we really just never really missed a beat on that, because we had, people like to buy software from people that are in their industry. They understand their industry. So when I can say, okay, it's trucking, we'll call these 3 trucking companies and see what they say about the software. And, we've had people that, say crazy stuff as, oh, if you like sex, you'd love their software. I mean, it's always crazy stuff about our software, because we literally bend over backwards to say, what's not working, or what do you need to do, and just get it done. Just make them happy, get it done, regardless of the industry.
Yeah, so in talking about all this IBM stuff and the direction and everything they went, I mean, FileNet wasn't the first of the big boys to come and go. There's been a lot of big boys in this industry that have just not survived. And IBM's making a big deal out of this as the 30th year for the AS400 in the industry and all that. But guess what? Real Vision Software's been around for 30 years as well. And what are some of the secrets? You've touched on them a little bit, how you operated, how you're working with the business partners and all, but it's an ultra competitive industry. Customers have a business to run. They may love you, but they're going to drop you if you can't keep up with the times and things like that. You've got development things that talk about just a little bit. What are you most proud of that you've been able to endure over the past 30 years and still standing here despite the big boys coming and going? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, one of the nice things is that we've got people, number one, that work for us, that have worked for us literally since the company started, but we also have business partners that have been hanging around since we started. We've got software companies that we've interfaced with. I mean, it's kind of funny. I'm doing interfaces with Central Square as we speak. All right, but I've done interfaces with HTE, then SunGuard, then whatever that other stepping stone was before they got. So we've gone through more iterations with more other software companies that, used to be this name and now they're that name. But RVI is still RVI and still right here and still doing interfaces. We have to introduce ourselves to newer people at the older companies, but it tells you that we did something right to our business partners. When you've got business partners like a NetData's company is almost identically as old as us. I mean, we're like within a year apart of the foundation. And to this day, I can still get new sales in from NetData. And that's government software for people that don't know them. But I've had Fosco Bridges at their company and just people that have been around us since day one. I remember when he and his partner drove up to our office in Alexandria, and it was 2 guys starting a software company and government software. They're out of Jackson, Mississippi, and you're just like, we knew y'all from the start, y'all knew us from the start, and here we are 30 years later, and we're still best friends, and they're still selling our software. So I think what that tells you is that we pay attention to what their needs are, and that I always, Dave, my partner, has always been right about one thing. And he said, Monty, you get up in the morning and you take the tough calls first. So if you've got somebody you got to call and say, look, we can't do this, or I'm sorry, it's going to be a day late, you do it. And then secondarily, you treat everybody the way you want to be treated. So they know, everybody knows, including our employees, know that if they need to talk to Monty, they can call and talk to Monty. You know, unless I'm on a call right that minute when they call, I'll call them back. But they know if they pick up a call and say, Monty, I've got this special customer I need you to talk to, because they really want to make sure that you know what they need to do, or whatever the problem is, that I will make the call and I will talk to them. I'll make them feel comfortable. I'll deliver exactly what they want. And they'll know at the end of the day that even though the system's up and running and happy, that they can always call me on the phone and say, hey, look, can we talk to you about something? I just got off the phone with Bunzel, been our customer forever and a day, out of St. Louis. They're doing some new stuff on mobile and we're working with them on it. And then they know if they need Monty to get on a call with them to discuss it out, get the phone, let's go. I'm happy to do it. Love doing it, actually.
That's a good lead. And Monty, customers kind of have always driven the development and advancement of the product here. And like you look back over the years, and even a document has changed. A document used to mean a piece of paper. It doesn't mean that anymore. It can be an electronic record. You've got industry regulations that just get tougher and tougher. I mean, just everything changes, and not the least of which is the expectations of your customer set. The bar, they're constantly raising the bar for you on a development standpoint. But talk about how maybe the customers impact how you develop the product, and maybe if there's some perspectives you have on how some of the things you've seen that where customers have really changed their business using a product like RVI. And I'll even throw a third element in there. What's a good fit for RVI? What's a good ideal customer situation coming in? So basically, how are the customers helping you driving your product development? Talk about maybe how some of them are changing their business, and what's a good fit for us?
Right. So the first thing about imaging is that when a customer sits down and thinks about it, they say, okay, imaging, and they got maybe in their mind, hey, this one thing I've got to solve, this payroll issue that I've got to be able to let my employees look at their checks, or I've got to get W-2s where they can view it. Whatever their issue is, whether it's accounts payable, they're kind of thinking about that. But then when they talk to us on the phone, and there's some simple little imaging things out there, even these big companies where they drag and drop this one document and they tie it to this one record. Boom, we're an imaging system, right? They don't understand. You have to have versioning. You have to have redactions. You have to have security. You have to be able to show stuff to some people, don't show stuff to some people. I mean, imaging is so complicated in its real, true native form. It's not just drag a little document and show it to somebody on a computer screen and say, there it is. But there's a lot of people out there that tout that, oh, that's an imaging system. But anyway, when it comes down to it, the customer that first has a focus on one thing, but realizes if they come to Real Vision that now I can move it into payroll, and now I can move it into my customer information stuff, and now I can move it to all these other departments that need imaging, and I don't have to go buy another one. I don't have to go put in some more hardware, and I don't have to worry how this one works this way and that one works that way. And can I actually make them all talk together at the same time? Wouldn't that be cool? So Real Vision fits every department they've got. We are native on the IBMI, and if there's anything I knock on wood about, now we've been in business 30 years. I've never gotten the call. I don't have a fear tomorrow morning I'm gonna get a call that somebody's gonna say, we just blew y'all out of the water. We're filled up on imaging and we can't put one more document in our system. Never has happened. And I have Pioneer Communications. I have some of the biggest companies in the world. I've got people taking 100,000 scanned documents a day in on the system for years, and we still have never gotten that phone call that they blew RVI out of the water. So that's a phobia I don't have, and that's a great thing to be. So they can expand it, and we don't charge them to expand it. I think that's one of the greatest marketing things is that you buy a Real Vision, you get it, and you can expand it to almost 66, 70 systems. So I can have it in payroll, and then I can have it in HR, and I can have it and on, and it doesn't cost you anymore. People, they don't even understand what a great value that is, and it's got the workflow and everything built into it. So back to your question about what's a good fit for RVI. I love customers that had homegrown software back in the old days for 100 days because they got pride in their software. Now their little software, they press one little button and now they've got imaging tied to it. It's great. But nowadays, there's bot software, there's cloud software, there's web software, but we can still interface it to all of those. But they understand when they purchase RVI, it's not looking single focused on one area, that they realize that now I can take care of these AP people that are hounding on me about invoices. Now I can take care of the payroll people that have to have all these applications coming in and be able to get to this and workflow this and get people to approve these documents and things like that. That's all already built into our software. They're turning on features in our software that don't cost them anything extra, but they're not having to engineer software. They're not having to say, okay, now I need to build a screen that figures out what's in their work basket and all that kind of stuff. We've done all that.
That's such a good point, Monty. I think like customers, many times they'll come in and they're thinking too small up front, and they kind of forget all the things they should have been thinking about on the front end. And then it's a little too late to realize that the product they might have picked can't handle that. On the other hand, then you got customers that overcomplicate it on the front end and they get a little frustrated. And maybe what you've really built them is a bulletproof system that can really accommodate anything from a simple electronic file cabinet type implementation all the way up through sophisticated workflows and integration. And you're even doing some interesting thing with importing inbound emails and stuff. There's a lot of sophistication you can get into, or on the other end of the spectrum, you can start very small with a limited number of users and things, and it just runs the whole spectrum of opportunities.
But that's what's cool is in the same company, you'll have exactly that. In the same company, they'll have, look, I've got maintenance on these trailers for these tractors and the thing, and I need something to keep track of all my maintenance or my hazmat documents. A simple scan, retrieve, get it out there where I can have it in my hand. But on the B side of that, I need complicated workflow to know what customer it is and what documents they have to pay their bill, right? So the same company will have all those needs, just in different departments, In some it's simple, in some it's real fancy and complicated, but RVI can do it. And RVI can do it all in the same system. That's what's nice is when I tell people, you already own that. Let's just turn it on and let it rip. Let's go. Just, and I could show you like graphs I had from Rawlings and stuff where they've done flow charts, fancy workflow flow charts and all that stuff. But I say, if you can just put that down where we can understand it all together, boom, we can turn it on this morning and make it work. And it's just it's a hoot when you get to do it. It really is a lot. There's a lot of satisfaction in this job.
Well, Monty, I got one more business question for you. This would obviously I've got to bring up, talk a little bit about how the pandemic how you fared through that as a company. And there have been some changes, particularly in how we deliver services and such during the pandemic. Talk about what adjustments, if any, you've had to make, how it's impacted you, what you've had to do to kind of deal with that, which is certainly something we hadn't run into in the past 30 years.
First, the pandemic was a great stress test for RVI because we had customers that were in their offices that all of a sudden, boom, went away from their offices, right? They're working from home. Well, with RVI, our version 9 release, version 8 also, we had web. It was already designed to run over the web. So they didn't cost them any extra. They just set up the web server on the IBM I and press a button and boom, they're back at RVI where they can look at their documents, import documents, scan documents, and do everything just through a web browser. Our version 9 is fancier than that, looks better than that because it's newer technology. One of the true things I'll say is that I bought a front-end GUI, didn't buy. I went to a front-end GUI called Sencha, S-E-N-C-H-A, which was an open source company that was based out of California at the time. They've been purchased from Idera since then, but that product has truly revolutionized our software, absolutely to the biggest part that I could ever say. It's a great company. Their software runs solid as a rock. I mean, solid as a rock. So we can pop up windows and show things and make things come in graphs and charts and grids that are just phenomenal. So when people said, we got to stay home and we got to get all these documents, but they still got to do AP and they still got to do approvals, whatever, you say, okay, bring up our web browser. All right, click here. Wow, that looks cool. And it even starts showing them all their stuff in graphs and charts that they weren't used to seeing. I mean, we age stuff on the graphs and charts, and they've got more technology, more information about their documents in their web browser than they ever even knew of, because they were so used to running the green screens. So now they're doing all their work through the browser, and like, how this thing is, it's fast, it's efficient, it's cool. And like you said, now nobody wants to touch paper. So now we've got this email import. So people send their bills through email. We automatically extract the attachments off the emails, automatically look for the PO numbers and figure out the buyer and route it to the right work basket. And I mean, all that stuff happens automatically. So you got people that come into work in the old days, they drive to their office and sit down at their green screen and figure out what they need to scan in today, to now they're sitting at home and they open up their browser and RVI says, okay, you got 5 things put in your work basket while you were sleeping last night. Let's take a look at them and approve them or do what we got to do with them. It's really revolutionized that. And now we've got so much back-end statistics with our graphs and charts. I can tell you, how long have you had it? When did you get it? Where did it go? What did you approve? What did you not approve? Why are you arguing back and forth between you and this other person about the price on this? I see you sent it to them, they sent it to you, you said this, they said, I mean, all that's tracked in our software. So we can do things like, say, if it's overdue, if it's been there over 3 days, send it to somebody. I mean, all this technology now on the back end makes their lives, even though they're working remote, so much better than it was back when they were working in the office. So when paper became the bad guy in 2020, it just gave us that much more, ammunition of why you need to go in and jump off the hill and let's get imaging running. We've never had a real failed project. I mean, we've gone into some companies that, and that's another thing with the RVI, I want to get it up and running in a couple of weeks. Right. I really want to get it up and running in a week. And your question about what has changed, we normally put an installer on site. Now we're really keeping an installer remote, which does make it a little more difficult on them, but the software will run. They know it'll run. But I mean, one time Atlas Van Lines was looking at our software and I did a presentation. I was in on the call with them and everything. And they said, well, how long do you think it'll take? Atlas Van Lines based out of Canada, but they're nationwide. They're a big company. And I said, well, we could get 2 people on site for 2 wetes. They were like, this guy has no idea what he's doing. Like he thinks he can get us up and running in 2 weeks. And they called the vice president, Dave Woodring, at the time and said, we thought y'all knew, but I can't believe it. So anyway, so they went on and bought our software anyway. We put 2 people on site for 2 weeks. They absolutely love our software. They've been running it ever since. It's crazy, but we know what their goal is. It's not that I'm coming to write software for you. I'm coming to turn on software for you. So it's a big difference.
Well, Monty, always advancing, and you've really come a long, long way from pulling that image off of that card in Dallas to where you're at today and what we're doing. And before I close this out, we need to take a look a little bit into your personal life. I mean, the elephant in the room here is sitting right behind you. You got that beautiful piece of machinery with that young-looking pilot. And you've got some other passions outside the world of software development. So talk about that a little bit. Tell us about a couple of your favorite passions.
I mean, one of the great things about owning the software company is that it has been good for me financially. And, personally, it's rewarding. It's really rewarding. The company was started by me and Dave Woodring, and Dave's retired over the last about 3 years now. And so I'm basically running the thing. John Paul Roundtree is our new vice president. But yeah, it's given me a lot of free time to some extent to enjoy life, and life has been great. So yeah, one of my passions has been flying airplanes. That's the 2nd or 3rd airplane I've owned back in the background there, and it's just been, it's one of those things where money's money, and this is me. This is not made up me. This is not pretend to be because I'm talking to Lynn me. This is me. I just a guy from Alexandria having a good time, and when I sit in the left seat on a pilot seat, my partner Dave always said that your money until you sit in that left seat, then you become serious. That's
right.
It's another game. And I guess I do to some extent. It's one of those things, and I'm sure people do yoga and people do other things where you get or golf, where you really get involved to where your work is totally back. You don't even think about what's going to work. And that's the way flying is for me. When I finally open the door and climb in the pilot seat, it's just like, okay, now it's serious and now it's fun. But I mean, I'm in Florida today. I flew over on Sunday. That plane's pressurized. I went to 15,000 feet and cruised on over here, and just the whole time. And that's what's weird. That's another thing. I've been flying for 30 years, over 30 years, actually. It's hard to believe that you can have a hobby or a sport that you're still excited about 30 years later. And that's why flying is. It's every flight is a new flight. Every flight could be cloudy, could be rainy, could be clear, could be bumpy, could be over territory you've never flown over before. I mean, everything about it's new every time. So it's just exciting. And it's just one of my passions. And then in the background's my grandchild, my oldest grandchild. I have three, and he's 5 now. He was 4 then, and he absolutely loves to fly the airplane. I had 2 daughters, and they enjoy riding in the plane. Neither one were going to be pilots. That little fella, he thinks it's the big Dumbo ride. When I let him in there, he's going to shove on the wheel and pull back on the wheel and I'm like, you're going to get somebody sick. He's like, why would they get sick? And I'm like, can't be flying like that. But
you're in trouble with that one. I can guarantee
that
you're
one
in trouble with it.
And he's smart. I mean, and he's just a hoot. He really is. But all 3 of them are a lot of fun. But so that's my off work passion is flying the airplane for fun. And my happiest day of the week is Friday at 4 o'clock when I'm trying to hide in the airplane and blast off or somewhere. But that's just that's one of the perks of owning my own company. I do get to fly it for work sometimes. So if I do have a customer somewhere I want to go, back when we got to go to places and conventions and stuff, I'd fly it to that. But it is a nice option. So if you got somebody that's got something complicated and you want to sit down with them, you say, where are you at again? They say Missouri. Say, okay, I can be there in an hour and a half. Where do you want to meet? And just jump in the plane and blast off. I did that Friday. I was interviewing a new employee that was just down in Lafayette, Louisiana. It wasn't on my schedule to go do, but I had some extra time. And I was like, and it was like, yeah, I'm available today at lunch. I said, well, great, I'll be there. And just hop in the plane, 20-minute flight, jump down there, go have dinner with them, send them the paperwork today to hire them, and just move on. So it really does change the world. And that's the big thing about the plane is that when you say in an hour, I can be somewhere that would take me 5 hours to have driven to or 8 hours to have driven to, it changes everything.
Yeah, you're like Johnny Cash. Every time I get you on a demo, you've been everywhere, man. That's a good sign. Hey, Monty, been a blast talking to you today.
Oh, appreciate it.
I thank you a lot for your time, but I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. Real Vision Software, we've been around for 30 years, and we've got 30 years of document capture, workflow, integration experience. So as Monty likes to frequently say, we have probably heard your story before. We've got thousands of customers from every industry you can imagine. They trust RVI to manage millions of documents every single day. So this is Len Knutson and Monty Chicola. We're the RVI guys today, and we're all in on your paperwork challenges. And if you want to connect with us, you've got our emails there, or just visit our website at realvisionsoftware.com. Click the schedule a demo button. We'll be sure to get back to you. And we greatly appreciate your interest in the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, give us a like, post a comment, or share it. Thanks much. Catch you, Monty.
Thank you, Lynn. Take care. Bye-bye.